This snappy little video is about maintaining an effective learning environment. Some tips. First of all, you want to create an environment that maximizes learning. What you do or don't do makes a difference in this regard. Prevention is the best way to manage problems. Keep problems from happening in the first place. That means knowing your students. That means planning. That means keeping them actively engaged. Now, there is a continuum in your classroom and in society. Control on the one side. Nobody likes a controlling classroom, a teacher, or a society. Chaos on the other. Nobody likes that. We like to find this place in the middle that has structure. We know what the guidelines and the boundaries are. It's a continuum. Some classes need a little bit more of this. Some are a little bit more of that. So we want structure and not control. Discipline is not conformity or uniformity. We don't want sheep. We don't want trained mice or rats. We want human beings who are learning. We don't want education that is something done to students. We want learning to be something that students do. Perfect control usually means authoritarian. If there's perfect control, that means external control. Students sit quietly. They are kept busy. They are passive and compliant. And that's not a good learning environment. That's not a good society either. Discipline means actually reducing the reliance on external power and control. Again, think of societies where control is imposed externally. Think of North Korea versus a society that has some rules, but lots of freedom and empowerment. So discipline is self-discipline, ideally. That children learn how to discipline their own behavior. That means you are teaching proper conduct and why. You're not just making bad things happen when students misbehave. You're teaching the correct behaviors. In order to develop some discipline, learners must be given independence. They must have practice making choices if they're going to learn how to make good choices. So, for development of self-control, neither a teacher-dominated authoritative classroom is good, nor a chaotic permissive. You need to find this place right in the middle where you are creating structure. Some teacher traits that help in maintaining an effective learning environment. This is somewhat of a transition, but with itness. Now, I did not make this term up. This is actually a term. It means being aware of what is happening in your classroom. You see your students. You are aware of what is going on at all time. You don't zone out and focus on one student. Overlapping is like multitasking. You can do 2 or 3 things. You can talk to one student and maintain some idea what's going on over here and over there. Group focus, that means you keep as many students as actively engaged as possible. Movement management, that means keeping the lesson moving, the appropriate pace, not too fast, not too slow. You can sense when you're boring the pants off your students. Oh yes, you know when a lesson is not going well and when you need to give up the ship. And you avoid these abrupt transitions. This all has to do with movement management and pacing. Abrupt transitions is where you're teaching and all of a sudden you stop and say, okay, time for gym. You give out verbal mile markers. All right, in about 10 minutes we have gym class, so you need to start. All right, those are verbal mile markers. Procedures and rules. Good classrooms have them. Procedures are different than rules. Procedures is how the class goes about things. The routines, the prescribed steps for an activity, like going to lunch or going to recess or some such thing. You have procedures for discussions or how to use the computer. Good teachers teach and practice the procedures. They teach them explicitly the first couple weeks of school, and they practice them so students know exactly what the procedures are. Rules, statements that describe the acceptable behavior, and unacceptable, but mostly acceptable. Rules should be written statements stated in the positive, the behaviors that you want to see. And you want to have just a few general rules. And again, look for the behaviors you want to see. For example, successful teachers have a few rules based on principles. They post their rules, state their rules in positive, and they have consequences are consistent with logical consequences. A few rules, positively stated, consistent in enforcing them. Here's an example of rules from Mr. Smith's second grade classroom, all stated in the positive, the behaviors we want to see. General. Classroom rules. You can do all sorts of Google searches and find them. Now, the key again is a few rules. 5 to 6, definitely no more than 7 or 8. But I would try to stay in the 5 or 6 range. And that is it. Just some simple tips for maintaining an effective learning environment.